The California hotel that should not exist. I didn't find the hotel in a travel guide. I didn't hear about it from locals either. In fact, every local I later asked denied it ever existed. They smiled politely, shook their heads, and suggested I was confusing it with something else, a different building, a different town, a different memory. But memories don't leave paper trails, and this one did. I first came across the name while reviewing archived missing person files connected to Northern California. At the time, I was researching a completely different case, an unrelated disappearance from the late 1990s, a hiker who vanished somewhere between Redding and the Sierra foothills. Standard stuff, incomplete timelines, conflicting witness statements, no body recovered. Then I noticed a pattern. 3 separate missing person reports, different years, different counties, each included the same detail. A hotel stay. Not a famous one, not a chain, not even a well-documented roadside motel, just a vague reference in the reports. Subject was last seen checking into a small hotel off the highway. No address, no room number, no staff names. At first, I assumed it was lazy paperwork. Older reports often lack detail. But when I dug deeper, the coincidence became harder to ignore. The hotel name appeared again and again, always spelled the same way, always without an address, always followed by the same outcome. The person never checked out. The earliest case I found dated back to 1974. A man named Daniel Rowe, age 36, traveling alone from Sacramento to Eureka. According to family, he stopped to rest overnight somewhere along Highway 299. He called his sister that evening, said he'd found a quiet little hotel, and would finish the drive in the morning. That call was the last time anyone heard from him. His car was found 3 days later, parked legally, undamaged, keys missing. No sign of a struggle, no signs of foul play, just a receipt on the passenger seat. The receipt listed one charge, 1 night stay, cash, and the hotel name. No phone number, no address. The investigating officer noted something unusual in his report. Attempts to locate the hotel failed. Local directories didn't list it. County business records showed no such property operating in the area. The conclusion at the time was simple. Daniel must have misremembered the name. Case closed. The second case surfaced in 1989. Linda Chavez, 29, graduate student, driving from San Jose to visit family in Oregon. Her roommate reported that Linda had planned to stop overnight somewhere north of Chico. Gas receipts confirmed she made it that far. A truck driver later told police he'd spoken to her briefly at a gas station. She mentioned staying at the old hotel near the trees. When asked to clarify, the witness couldn't, because when police pressed him later, he couldn't remember the hotel name at all. Linda's car was discovered abandoned near a turnout. No damage, no personal items missing, no evidence of an accident. And again, buried in the report, a single line. Subject may have stayed overnight at hotel name. Same name as Daniel's case, same lack of address, same result. By the time I reached the third case, I stopped believing in coincidence. Mark Ellison, age 42, insurance adjuster, disappeared while driving to inspect wildfire damage in Northern California. His phone last pinged near a rural highway corridor known for limited service. His voicemail, left for his wife at 9:11 p.m., was chillingly casual. "I'm turning in early. Found a small hotel off the road. I'll call you in the morning." He never did. Investigators located his vehicle 2 days later, parked neatly, locked, wallet inside, laptop gone, and written on a notepad in the glove compartment, the hotel name, spelled correctly, underlined twice. That was the moment I decided to search for the building itself. I started with county records, property registries, historical zoning maps, fire department logs. Nothing. No hotel matching that name had ever been licensed. Then I searched newspaper archives. That's when things changed. A single mention appeared in a local paper from the early 1950s. A short article, buried near the classifieds, no headline, just a few lines about a small highway hotel temporarily sheltering travelers during a severe winter storm. The name matched, the location was vague, and the article ended with an odd sentence. Several guests were unable to be located after the storm cleared. No follow-up article ever appeared, no correction, no explanation. I contacted a retired journalist who had worked at the paper decades later. He remembered the storm, remembered missing people, but when I asked about the hotel, he grew quiet. "That place?" he said. "We were told not to dig into it." By whom? He wouldn't say. The twist didn't come until I noticed something else. All three missing individuals, Daniel, Linda, and Mark, shared one strange detail. They had all checked into the hotel on the same date. Different years, same day. December 25th. Christmas night. I pulled more files, more cases, and the pattern held. Every documented missing person case connected to the hotel occurred between December 24th and December 26th. Always winter, always storms nearby, always travelers alone, and always the same ending. No body, no suspect, no hotel. That's when I realized something unsettling. This wasn't a hotel people stumbled upon randomly. It appeared only when conditions were right, and only to certain people. People who were already between places, between destinations, between moments. So I decided to drive the route myself. Not on Christmas. Not yet. I wanted to see if anything remained. What I found wasn't a building. It was a gap. A stretch of road where GPS glitched, where radio static swallowed stations whole, where trees stood unnaturally close to the shoulder, as if reclaiming space that once belonged to something else. And for just a second, I smelled old carpet and pine cleaner. I left immediately, but the hotel hadn't finished with me. Because 2 weeks later, I found something in my inbox. A scanned police report. A new case. California. Missing person. Last seen checking into a small hotel off the highway. Same name. Same date. Same outcome. And at the bottom of the report, a handwritten note by the responding officer. Hotel could not be located. The problem with missing person cases is that they usually end quietly. No answers, no arrests, no final chapter. Just a file marked inactive and a family left to interpret silence. That's why what I found next shouldn't have existed, because someone, one person, had survived the hotel, and his statement had been buried for decades. I discovered his name by accident while combing through California Head Traffic Patrol archives. The file wasn't labeled as a disappearance. It wasn't even classified as suspicious. It was filed under weather-related assistance. That alone should have raised questions. The man's name was Thomas Reed, age 58 at the time of the incident, long-haul truck driver, clean record, no history of mental illness, no criminal background, the kind of witness investigators usually trust. According to the report, Reed had been rescued during a severe winter storm in Northern California in December of 1982. His truck was found abandoned near a mountain highway. He was located nearly 12 hours later, alive, disoriented, but unharmed. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was where he claimed to have spent the night. In his initial statement, Reed told officers that he'd taken shelter in a small hotel off the road after his truck stalled.
He described the building in surprising detail: the number of floors, the layout of the lobby, the smell of pine cleaner mixed with old carpet. He even described the desk clerk: middle-aged, calm, no name tag. The officers wrote down the hotel name exactly as Reed gave it. The same name, the same one tied to every disappearance I had already uncovered. But unlike the others, Reed left. Or at least that's what the reports said. The officers attempted to locate the hotel later that day. They failed. The building didn't appear on maps. No locals recognized the description. No business records existed. When pressed again, Reed became visibly shaken. According to the supplemental notes, subject expresses confusion, states hotel felt real, but is unable to explain location.
After our interview, I cross-checked Reed's claims. His brother had indeed died in a truck accident in the 1960s. Same region, same winter conditions, same week of December. The implications were disturbing. The hotel wasn't just connected to missing people, it was connected to the dead, not as victims, as participants. I asked Reed one last question before we parted. "Why talk now?" I said, "after all these years?" He stared into his untouched coffee. "Because it's getting closer," he said. "Closer to what?" "Christmas," he replied, "and the hotel doesn't like being remembered." That night, I reviewed the case files again. Something I'd missed before stood out. In every disappearance tied to the hotel, the responding officer had noted the same detail. A bell, sometimes heard, sometimes found, sometimes written off as auditory hallucination. I checked the most recent case, the one emailed to me weeks earlier. This time, the officer had added a new line. Witness reports bell ringing at time of disappearance. The date on the report? December 25th. The time? 6:14 a.m. And then, my phone rang. Unknown number. When I answered, there was no voice, just a sound. Soft, metallic, familiar. A bell. I didn't sleep that night. After the call, the bell, the silence, I sat in my apartment with every light on, replaying Thomas Reed's words over and over. Not because they sounded unbelievable, but because they fit too well. Too many details lined up. The smell, the clocks, the bell, the date, and most of all, the time. 6:14 a.m. It appeared in every case like a fingerprint. I started building a timeline. Every disappearance linked to the California hotel occurred within the same 48-hour window each year, between Christmas Eve night and early Christmas morning. But when I mapped the exact moments people vanished, a pattern emerged that I hadn't noticed before. They didn't just disappear at random times. They disappeared at 6:14 a.m., or within minutes of it. Sometimes the time was exact, sometimes it was written as shortly after 6, but when cross-referenced with phone records, radio logs, or emergency call timestamps, everything pointed back to the same minute, 6:14. That wasn't coincidence, that was design. I reached out to a forensic psychologist who'd consulted on multiple missing person cases. I didn't mention the hotel at first, I just asked about time fixation in trauma reports. People anchor to moments, she told me, especially moments where something irreversible happens. I asked her what kind of moment would be strong enough to anchor multiple unrelated individuals. She didn't hesitate. The moment of realization, she said. Not death, not injury. The moment someone understands they aren't going back. That answer sent me back to the archives. I pulled coroner's reports, accident reconstructions, weather logs. I searched for anything that happened at or around 6:14 a.m. connected to Northern California. And then I found it. December 25th, 1953, 6:14 a.m. A massive winter storm caused a chain reaction accident along a rural highway corridor. Multiple vehicles, limited visibility, sub-freezing temperatures. At least 11 people were confirmed dead. Several more were never recovered. And among the structures destroyed during the storm, a small highway hotel. Its name matched the one in every case file. The hotel hadn't disappeared mysteriously. It had been destroyed, collapsed under the weight of ice and snow. Officially, it was listed as a total loss. But something didn't add up. I found the original fire marshal's report. The cause of collapse was listed as structural failure due to extreme weather. Standard language. But handwritten in the margin was a note I almost missed. Unable to account for all occupants. That line haunted me, because according to county records, the hotel was fully booked that night, and not all the bodies were found. I drove to the site, not on Christmas, not during a storm, just a quiet afternoon. There was no building, no ruins, no marker, just trees. Dense, old-growth trees that looked far older than the 70 years since the collapse. The forest floor was uneven, as if something had once been there and been swallowed whole. My GPS glitched, not dramatically, just enough to notice. The signal dropped for 30 seconds, then returned. Standing there, I understood something unsettling. The hotel didn't reappear because it wanted to. It reappeared because it hadn't finished collapsing. Not in the way buildings collapse, in the way moments do. I went back to Thomas Reed. I asked him if he remembered anything else, anything he hadn't told police. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said this. They weren't waiting to be saved, he said. They were waiting to be counted. According to Reed, the hotel on that night in 1982 wasn't full. It was missing people. Empty rooms, rooms that felt expectant, like placeholders. That was the next twist. The hotel wasn't trapping guests, it was filling vacancies. Every person who disappeared there fit a profile. Traveling alone, in transit, disconnected, already between chapters of their life, and crucially, all of them had narrowly avoided death before. Car accidents, near drownings, severe illness, close calls, people who had already brushed against the edge. I checked. Daniel Rowe had survived a major accident years before his disappearance. Linda Chavez had nearly died from pneumonia as a teenager. Mark Ellison had walked away from a workplace explosion with minor injuries. Thomas Reed's brother hadn't, and Thomas Reed himself had come close that night. But he remembered, and that memory, whatever it was, broke the cycle. The hotel wasn't a place, it was a moment repeating itself, a loop anchored to the last time it was whole. 6:14 a.m., Christmas morning, the exact minute rescue should have arrived, but didn't. I spoke to a disaster historian next. When I described the storm of 1953, he nodded. People still talk about that one, especially the missing. He told me something no official report mentioned. Survivors had claimed that some guests from the hotel were seen walking away from the wreckage, alive, before vanishing into the forest. Not running, walking calmly, as if following instructions. That detail connected something else Reed had said. They weren't scared, they were relieved. The hotel didn't feel like danger, it felt like permission. Permission to stop struggling, permission to rest, permission to stay. I reviewed the most recent disappearance again, the one from last December. The victim had left a voice message that investigators hadn't released publicly. I obtained it through a source. The recording was short, just a few seconds. I think I found somewhere to stay. It feels familiar. Then silence. At exactly 6:14 a.m., the call ended. And that is when I noticed something else. Every survivor, every single one had left before 6:14. Thomas Reed left at 6:07. Another lesser-known case involved a woman who stumbled onto the road at 6:10 and was picked up by a passing driver. They didn't leave after the bell. They left before it. I started to wonder if the hotel didn't let people go, if it simply stopped holding them once the moment passed. That thought terrified me, because by the time I realized it, I couldn't remember what I was holding on to. I began to notice changes in myself, small ones. I forgot appointments, missed calls, stopped replying to messages. It didn't feel like depression, it felt like narrowing, like my life was simplifying itself. One evening, I found a photograph on my desk. I don't remember printing it. It showed a hotel lobby, empty. The fire burned low,
Behind the desk stood the clerk, and next to him, an empty space, a place where someone should be standing. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I was standing behind the desk. I knew what everything was for: the bell, the guest book, the keys. They weren't tools, they were acknowledgments. Each ring marked someone's decision. Each erased name marked acceptance. "You don't have to stay," the clerk said beside me. "I'm not there," I replied. He smiled gently. "Neither were we," he said. I woke at 6:14 a.m. again, but this time there was something new. A sound outside, not a bell, an engine. I went to the window. Snow was falling, and down the street, headlights slowed. A car pulled over. The driver stepped out, confused, looking around. Then, a light appeared behind the trees, warm, yellow, steady. I understood then. The hotel didn't exist in the past. It existed wherever the pattern repeated, wherever someone reached that moment. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "Can you see it too?" I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed my coat, not to go toward the light, but away from it. As I stepped outside, something heavy lifted from my chest, like pressure releasing. Behind me, faint and distant, I heard it. The bell. I didn't turn around, and for the first time in weeks, I remembered exactly where I was going. But I knew this wasn't over, because the hotel still had vacancies, and now it knew my name.
I drove until the road stopped making sense. That's the only way I can describe it. Not that it ended, just that it stopped behaving like a road. The lane markings faded. The asphalt narrowed. The trees leaned inward, closer than they should have been, their branches heavy with snow that hadn't been forecast. My GPS still showed a route, but the distance counter froze, ticking down fractions of a mile without ever reaching 0. I didn't slow down. I knew, instinctively, that slowing down was how it caught you. The bell stayed with me. Not as a sound anymore, but as a pressure behind my ears, a reminder, like something tapping from the inside, waiting for acknowledgement. I kept thinking of the clerk's words from my dream. "You don't have to stay." What he hadn't said was that leaving came with a cost. I pulled into a gas station just before dawn. It looked ordinary enough. Fluorescent lights, a single pump working, the rest wrapped in yellow tape. Inside, the clerk barely looked up. "Rough night?" he asked. I nodded. "You're not the first," he said. That made my hands freeze on the counter. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shrugged. "People get turned around out here, especially this time of year." I wanted to ask him if he'd heard of the hotel. I didn't. Some questions feel like invitations. I stayed awake until morning proper, until the sun was fully up, until the world felt anchored again. The pressure faded. The smell of pine cleaner disappeared. By noon, I almost convinced myself it had passed. Almost. The next disappearance happened 2 days later. A woman named Emily Foster, age 34, freelance photographer. She vanished while driving north from San Francisco to document winter landscapes. Her last Instagram post showed snow-dusted trees and a caption that read, "Found a place to stop for the night. Didn't know this road had anything on it." The post timestamp? December 25th, 6:02 a.m. I didn't need to read the rest of the report. I already knew how it would end. Car found intact. No sign of struggle. Phone recovered. Hotel mentioned. Same name. I felt something shift then. Not fear. Responsibility. I had spent months uncovering patterns, documenting connections, naming the thing without ever confronting what that knowledge demanded. The hotel wasn't hunting randomly. It was balancing something. And by remembering it, by tracing it, I had stepped into the equation. I went back to the forest. Not the original site, another stretch of highway farther north, one that matched the pattern: winter accidents, missing travelers, storms that arrived too quickly. I parked on the shoulder and waited. Night fell fast. Snow followed. And then, the light. It didn't materialize all at once. First, a glow between the trees, then structure, windows, a porch, a building that looked like it had always been there and never had. The hotel, whole, waiting. I didn't approach. I watched. A car pulled in behind me, an SUV, rental plates. A man stepped out, phone in hand, clearly lost. He looked around, saw the light, and relief crossed his face so quickly it hurt to watch. He took one step toward it. I shouted. The sound surprised both of us. "Don't!" I said. "Keep walking. The road's back that way." He hesitated. "I just need a room," he said. "Just for the night." Behind him, the bell rang. Once. Soft. Final. Then I saw it. What the bell really was. Not a signal, a confirmation. The man looked at me, confused, irritated. "Do you work there?" he asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just left." That was enough. Something in my voice, maybe the urgency, maybe the certainty, made him hesitate. He looked back at the light, then at the road behind us. "What's wrong with it?" he asked. I searched myself for the right answer. "It remembers you," I said, finally, "more than you remember yourself." He took a step back. The light flickered. The bell did not ring again. The hotel didn't vanish, but it dimmed, as if disappointed. The man drove away without another word. I stayed until the snow stopped, until the trees were just trees again, until the light was gone. That night I dreamed of the guest book. My name was there, written neatly, waiting. I woke at 6:14 a.m., but this time I wasn't alone. My phone was ringing, a number I didn't recognize. I answered. No bell, just a voice. They said you could help. I drove until the road stopped making sense. That's the only way I can describe it. Not that it ended, just that it stopped behaving like a road. The lane markings faded. The asphalt narrowed. The trees leaned inward, closer than they should have been, their branches heavy with snow that hadn't been forecast. My GPS still showed a route, but the distance counter froze, ticking down fractions of a mile without ever reaching zero. I didn't slow down. I knew, instinctively, that slowing down was how it caught you. The bell stayed with me. Not as a sound anymore, but as a pressure behind my ears, a reminder, like something tapping from the inside, waiting for acknowledgement. I kept thinking of the clerk's words from my dream. You don't have to stay. What he hadn't said was that leaving came with a cost. I pulled into a gas station just before dawn. It looked ordinary enough. Fluorescent lights, a single pump working, the rest wrapped in yellow tape. Inside, the clerk barely looked up. "Rough night?" he asked. I nodded. "You're not the first," he said. That made my hands freeze on the counter. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shrugged. "People get turned around out here, especially this time of year." I wanted to ask him if he'd heard of the hotel. I didn't. Some questions feel like invitations. I stayed awake until morning proper, until the sun was fully up, until the world felt anchored again. The pressure faded. The smell of pine cleaner disappeared. By noon, I almost convinced myself it had passed. Almost. The next disappearance happened 2 days later. A woman named Emily Foster, age 34, freelance photographer. She vanished while driving north from San Francisco to document winter landscapes. Her last Instagram post showed snow-dusted trees and a caption that read, "Found a place to stop for the night. Didn't know this road had anything on it." The post timestamp? December 25th, 6:02 a.m. I didn't need to read the rest of the report. I already knew how it would end. Car found intact. No sign of struggle. Phone recovered. Hotel mentioned. Same name. I felt something shift then. Not fear. Responsibility. I had spent months uncovering patterns, documenting connections, naming the thing without ever confronting what that knowledge demanded. The hotel wasn't hunting randomly. It was balancing something. And by remembering it, by tracing it, I had stepped into the equation. I went back to the forest. Not the original site, another stretch of highway farther north, one that matched the pattern. Winter accidents, missing travelers, storms that arrived too quickly. I parked on the shoulder and waited. Night fell fast. Snow followed. And then, the light. It didn't materialize all at once. First, a glow between the trees, then structure, windows, a porch, a building that looked like it had always been there and never had. The hotel, whole, waiting. I didn't approach. I watched. A car pulled in behind me, an SUV, rental plates. A man stepped out, phone in hand, clearly lost. He looked around, saw the light, and relief crossed his face so quickly it hurt to watch. He took one step toward it. I shouted. The sound surprised both of us. "Don't!" I said. "Keep walking. The road's back that way." He hesitated. "I just need a room," he said. "Just for the night." Behind him, the bell rang. Once. Soft. Final. Then I saw it. What the bell really was. Not a signal, a confirmation. The man looked at me, confused, irritated. "Do you work there?" he asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just left." That was enough. Something in my voice, maybe the urgency, maybe the certainty, made him hesitate. He looked back at the light, then at the road behind us. "What's wrong with it?" he asked. I searched myself for the right answer. "It remembers you," I said, finally, "more than you remember yourself." He took a step back. The light flickered. The bell did not ring again. The hotel didn't vanish, but it dimmed, as if disappointed. The man drove away without another word. I stayed until the snow...
I know. The bell rang. Not once, twice. That had never happened before. The second ring echoed longer, heavier, as if something inside the hotel was adjusting to a variable it hadn't expected. Us. Sarah opened the door. I grabbed her arm. "Listen to me," I said. "If you walk toward that light without remembering something, anything, you're not coming back." She pulled away. "I remember everything," she said angrily. "I remember my husband, my life, our plans." "That's not what I mean," I said, but she was already moving. She took 3 steps toward the trees before stopping, not because I called her name, because the air changed. She turned slowly. "It feels like I'm forgetting something important," she said. I nodded. "That's how it starts." The hotel brightened, windows illuminated one by one. Inside, movement, silhouettes, waiting. Sarah's breath quickened. "They're expecting us." I didn't deny it. "They always are." I forced myself to speak the truth I've been avoiding. "The hotel doesn't take people who want to live," I said. "It takes people who are tired of choosing." Sarah laughed weakly. "That's everyone." "No," I said. "It's people who think stopping would be easier than continuing." Her eyes filled with tears. "My husband wouldn't do that." I swallowed. "They never think they are." The bell rang again. 6:14 a.m. I felt it like a line being drawn. Sarah stepped back, just one step. The light flickered. I saw the clerk then, standing on the porch. He looked exactly as I remembered from my dream. Calm, still, watching. He met my eyes, and for the first time, he looked tired. "You're disrupting the balance," he said. I didn't hear his voice. I understood it. "You're creating delay."
I stepped forward, placing myself between Sarah and the light. "Then count me," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Sarah stared at me. "What are you saying?" The clerk's gaze sharpened. "You know what that means," he said. I did. The hotel didn't take people by force, it took them by consent, and I had just offered mine. The bell rang once more, but this time it didn't sound final. It sounded curious. The ground beneath my feet felt solid and unreal at the same time. I was aware of every memory I had ever touched while researching the hotel. Every name, every face, every unfinished story. They pressed against me, not as fear, but as weight. This was what the staff carried. This was the cost. "I'll stay," I said, "but he leaves." The clerk didn't answer immediately. The hotel dimmed, as if considering. Then, a door opened. Not the front door, a side door, one I'd never seen before. From it stumbled a man, disoriented, alive. Jason Whitmore. Sarah screamed his name and ran to him. He collapsed into her arms, confused, shaking. "I fell asleep," he kept saying. "I just fell asleep." Behind them, the hotel began to fade. Not vanish, withdraw. The clerk watched me as the light receded. "You won't last. No one does." I met his gaze. "I don't have to. Just long enough." The trees closed in. The road returned. Snow felt like normal snow again. Jason lived. The hotel retreated. Sarah never asked how it happened. Some people don't want the answer. She just thanked me, over and over, until the words lost meaning. When they drove away, I stayed behind. Alone, waiting to see if the hotel would return. It didn't. Not that morning. I felt something inside me change. A subtle shift, like a door closing. Or opening. I wasn't sure which. That night, I dreamt of the staff again, but this time, they weren't behind the desk. They were leaving, one by one, walking out into the forest. Free. When I woke, it wasn't 6:14. It was later. The first time in weeks. I knew then what the hotel really was. Not a trap, not a predator. A holding pattern. For moments the world failed to resolve. And people like me, we weren't saviors. We were holder places. I don't know how many vacancies there are left. I don't know how many times I can stand in the way before the hotel decides I belong behind the desk. But I know this. As long as I keep moving, as long as I remember why I leave, the bell hasn't won. Not yet. I stopped keeping track of days after that. Not because time stopped working, but because it stopped mattering in the way it used to. When your sleep is broken into fragments, and your waking hours are spent chasing storms that may or may not exist yet, calendars lose their authority. Morning became a condition, not a moment. Night became a warning, and 6:14 a.m. became a line I watched for everywhere. The hotel didn't come back immediately after Jason Whitmore walked free. That worried me more than if it had. For weeks, the storms passed without incident. Cars slid off roads, yes, people got stranded, but they were found. Help arrived. No unexplained gaps in police logs. The bell stayed quiet. It felt like holding your breath. I spent that time doing something I'd avoided since the beginning. I went home. Not my apartment, the place I'd been sleeping between drives, but my actual home. The one I hadn't visited in over a year. The one filled with objects I'd packed away mentally because they pulled at me too hard. Photographs, old notebooks, a guitar I hadn't touched since college. I needed to test something. I needed to see if the hotel had loosened its grip or if I'd just learned to ignore it. The first night back, I slept for almost 8 hours straight. No bell, no dreams. When I woke, it was 7:02 a.m. I cried, quietly into the pillow, overwhelmed with the normality of it. That's when the emails started. At first, they were subtle. Messages from people who had found my earlier articles, survivors of accidents, family members of the missing, people who had noticed the same gaps I had but didn't have the language for them. They described similar things: a light, a sense of relief, a place that felt like permission.
and always the same detail buried somewhere in the story. Christmas. Morning. A bell. One email stood out. It came from a retired California state trooper named Evan Morales. He'd worked highway patrol in the northern districts for over 25 years, long enough, he said, to notice patterns he couldn't explain. He wanted to meet. Morales met me at a quiet rest stop overlooking a valley dusted with snow. He walked with a limp and spoke carefully, as if every word was rehearsed. I never put it in a report because there was nowhere to put it. He told me about calls they used to get every few years around Christmas, drivers disoriented, describing a hotel no one else could find. Sometimes they were rescued, sometimes they weren't. But the ones that weren't, Morales said, they always stopped talking at the same time. I already knew the answer. 6:14, I said. He nodded. Morales leaned back against his patrol car. There's something else, he said, something we were told off the record. He explained that after the storm of 1953, a federal review team had quietly examined the site, not just for structural failure, but for procedural breakdowns, delayed rescue, missed communications. According to Morales, one of the reviewers wrote a private memo that never made it into the final report. The memo described the site as a temporal failure point, a place where events did not resolve cleanly. That's not a real term, Morales said, but it stuck with me. It stuck with me, too, because it explained everything. The hotel wasn't haunting people, it was containing something. An unresolved moment, a backlog of outcomes that never finished happening. People who should have been rescued but weren't, people who should have died but didn't, people caught in between. Why you? Morales asked. Why do you think it started responding to you? I thought of the clerk's tired eyes, of the empty space beside him in the photograph. I noticed it, and I didn't look away. Morales studied me for a long moment. That's how it starts, he said quietly. The next incident happened in early January, not Christmas. That was new. A man in his 20s was found walking along a mountain road, hypothermic but alive. He couldn't explain where he'd been. He couldn't remember sleeping anywhere. But when paramedics asked him how he'd survived the night, he said something that froze my blood. I didn't sleep. I was waiting for the bell. The hotel was adapting, and that meant it was learning. The next morning, I woke up at 6:14, but this time there was no fear, just awareness and a decision. I started documenting everything. Not publicly. Not yet.
I wrote down every name, every incident, every survivor, every near miss. I created a record that didn't depend on me remembering it, something external, something that could outlast exhaustion. Because if the hotel thrived on forgetting, then memory was resistance. The bell rang again 2 weeks later. I heard it while driving through a pass at dawn. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. The hotel was back, and this time it wasn't waiting for me to intervene. It was calling. I pulled over and stepped out into the cold. The light glowed faintly between the trees, smaller than before, but sharper, more focused. I understood the message without words. It had vacancies, and it was done negotiating. I didn't walk toward it. Instead, I sat on the hood of my car and opened my notebook. I wrote names, dates, times. I wrote about the storm of 1953, about the people who hadn't been counted, about the moment that never finished. I wrote until my hands ached and the sun climbed higher. The bell rang again, once, then stopped. When I looked up, the light was gone. The forest was just a forest. The road was just a road. I don't know how long this will work. I don't know what happens when the hotel realizes it can't reclaim what's been remembered. But I know this. As long as I keep moving forward, as long as I keep writing, the moment stays unfinished. And so do I. Somewhere out there, the hotel is still trying to complete itself, but now it has competition, and memory is louder than any bell. The first time I failed to reach someone in time, I understood why the staff stopped counting. It happened on a narrow stretch of Highway 36 east of Red Bluff. The forecast had underestimated the storm. Again, snow fell heavier than expected, fast and thick, erasing the road in minutes. I was already driving when the call came in, forwarded from a county dispatcher who'd started recognizing my name. A man, early 40s, alone. His car had slid into a ditch but wasn't badly damaged. He said he was walking toward a light he could see through the trees. I told the dispatcher to keep him on the line. She tried. He didn't answer. By the time I reached the location, there was no light, only the hotel. It stood closer than I'd ever seen it before, as if it had learned efficiency. No long approach, no gradual reveal, just presence, whole and waiting, windows glowing warmly against the snow. The porch light was on, the wreath hung perfectly centered on the door, and the bell was already ringing. Once, twice. I ran. The snow fought me, grabbing at my legs, dragging at my breath. My lungs burned, not from cold, but from panic. I shouted his name until my throat tore itself raw. The hotel didn't react. It never did. I reached the porch just as the bell rang a third time. The door closed. Inside, everything went quiet. Not silent, quiet, the kind that absorbs sound rather than eliminating it. I stood there, snow melting off my coat, heart hammering, knowing without being told that I was too late. The clerk stood behind the desk. He looked fuller, more solid than before. "You interfered," he said. I didn't hear the words. I felt them. "I tried," I replied. He nodded once. "So did we." I saw the man then, or what was left of him. He stood near the fire, staring into the flames, his posture relaxed in a way no living person's ever is after a near-death experience. His coat lay folded neatly on the chair beside him. His face was calm, relieved, finished. The clerk followed my gaze. "He chose," he said. "No," I snapped. "He was exhausted." The clerk's expression softened, not in sympathy, but in recognition. "So were you," he said. That's when I felt the pull, not toward the hotel, toward the desk, toward the space beside the clerk that no longer felt empty. I stumbled back. The bell rang again, and this time I understood its purpose fully. It wasn't calling guests, it was counting staff. I ran. I don't remember leaving the porch. I don't remember the trees or the road or how I got back to my car. I only remember driving until the sun was fully up and the world felt louder again. I didn't stop shaking until noon. The man's name was Eric Lawson. I found it later in the missing person report. Married, 2 kids. He'd been driving back from visiting his father in hospice. Tired, distracted, carrying too much. I was 15 minutes away. For days after, the hotel followed me, not physically, mentally. I'd catch myself standing still for too long, staring out windows, losing time between thoughts. I began to understand how easy it would be to stop, how tempting. That's when the clerk appeared again, not in dreams, in reflections. The microwave door, a darkened phone screen, the rearview mirror at night, always watching, never urging, waiting. "You can't save everyone," he said once, his reflection aligning perfectly with mine. "I know," I replied. "Then why do you keep trying?" The answer came without effort, because stopping is how it wins. The hotel didn't retaliate, it adapted. Disappearances became quieter, less obvious, fewer storms, more subtle timing. People vanished in conditions that didn't make headlines, clear nights, mild weather, ordinary mistakes.
It was learning how to hide again. I changed tactics. Instead of chasing storms, I chased patterns of exhaustion, truck stops, late-night diners, highways known for long, uninterrupted stretches. I talked to people, warned them without explaining. Stop earlier than you planned. Don't drive through the night. If you see a light that feels too kind, turn around. Most laughed. Some listened. A few survived. The hotel grew quieter, but heavier. Each time it appeared, the air around it felt denser, as if it were accumulating mass, as if it were pulling more of itself into the present. I began to suspect the truth. The hotel didn't need new guests. It needed replacement staff. I found proof in an old coroner's addendum from 1953, a handwritten note, barely legible. Several individuals initially believed deceased, later unaccounted for, presumed relocation due to shock. Relocation, not death, not survival, relocation. The staff weren't replacements for the missing, they were the missing, people who had slipped sideways out of resolution, held in place so the world could continue pretending the moment had passed. One night I stood on a ridge overlooking a valley thick with fog. The hotel glowed below, dim but present. The clerk stood beside me, not physically, but close enough. "You're tired," he said. "Yes. You don't have to keep doing this." "I know." He waited. "What happens if I stop?" I asked. The clerk looked down at the hotel. "It finishes. And them? They rest." I thought of Eric Lawson, of the calm on his face, of how relieved he looked, of Sarah Whitmore holding her husband on the roadside, of the bell ringing twice instead of once, of the empty space beside the desk. "No," I said. The clerk nodded. "That's what I said, too." The next morning, I woke at 6:14, but instead of dread, I felt resolve. I couldn't destroy the hotel, I couldn't empty it, but I could keep it unfinished. I started leaving markers, not signs, not warnings, objects, a dropped glove near a turnout, a thermos left warm on a guardrail, a note tucked into a mile marker. Keep going, don't stop here. Small things, human things. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. Months passed, then years. The disappearances slowed, not stopped, but slowed enough that the pattern began to fray. The hotel appeared less often, its light dimmer, its bell quieter. The clerk began to fade, his reflections grew faint, his voice less certain. One night he stood beside me in a dream and looked relieved. "You remembered," he said. "Not everything, just enough." He smiled. That was the last time I saw him. I still wake up at 6:14 sometimes, not every day, only when the air feels heavy, only when the world feels paused. On those mornings, I get in my car and drive. Not toward the light, toward the road, because as long
I knew the end was coming when I stopped hearing the bell. For years it had been my constant, sometimes distant, sometimes close, sometimes only a pressure I felt when the air grew heavy and the world seemed to hesitate. Even when the hotel didn't appear, the bell reminded me it could, that the moment was still unfinished. Then one winter morning, I woke at 6:14 a.m., and there was nothing. No sound, no pressure, no sense of being watched, just silence. At first, I welcomed it. I made coffee, I stood by the window and watched the sun climb over the trees. The road outside my house was empty, ordinary, real. I told myself this was what victory felt like. But the silence didn't fade. It spread. The first report came from Oregon, a missing hiker, last seen during a sudden storm. His companion told investigators something strange, something that made my chest tighten. He said he saw a building, she told them. Not a cabin, not a ranger station. A hotel. Different state, same description. That night, I dreamed without images. No lobby, no fire, no clerk, just a sense of falling, slow, controlled, inevitable. When I woke, the time was 6:15, 1 minute late. I drove north, not chasing a storm this time, chasing the absence of one. The weather was calm, the roads clear, the kind of conditions where nothing should go wrong. That's when the hotel was most dangerous now, when no one expected it. I stopped at a turnout overlooking a wide stretch of forest, and there it was. Not whole, not solid, but present. The hotel looked smaller than I remembered, dimmer, like an old photograph losing contrast. Several windows were dark now, others flickered weakly. The porch sagged slightly, as if gravity had finally noticed it. And there was no bell. I stepped closer. For the first time in years, there was no resistance, no pressure pushing me away. The air felt thin, almost hollow. Inside, the lobby was nearly empty. The fire was out, the chairs were overturned, and behind the desk, no one. I felt something twist inside me. The clerk wasn't waiting, he was gone. I walked deeper into the hotel. Rooms stood open, abandoned mid-purpose. Beds unmade, luggage half-packed, shoes by doors that led nowhere. These weren't guests in waiting. These were guests who had been released, or forgotten. At the end of the hallway, I found the guest book. It lay open on the desk, pages fluttering slightly, though there was no wind. Most of the names were gone, not erased, resolved. Only a few remained, and one space at the bottom of the page, blank, waiting. That was when I understood. The hotel hadn't been weakening, it had been finishing, not because I stopped it, because I stayed too long. By holding the moment open, by delaying resolution again and again, I hadn't destroyed the pattern, I'd sustained it. The hotel didn't need guests anymore, it needed closure, and closure required one final thing: someone to stay. "You already know," a voice said. I turned. The clerk stood behind me, not as he'd been, but as he might have been once, younger, tired, human. "You kept it open," he said gently. "Now you have to let it close." I shook my head. "There has to be another way." "There always is," he replied. "You just don't like it." I thought of everyone I'd warned, everyone I'd turned away from the light, everyone who'd lived because I'd intervened. I thought of Eric Lawson, of the calm on his face, of the relief. "What happens if I stay?" I asked. The clerk looked around the empty lobby. "It ends," he said, "for good." "And me?" He hesitated. "Then you finally rest." The word terrified me more than death ever had. Rest, stopping, letting go of vigilance, letting the road end. I stepped back from the desk. "No," I said, "that's not closure, that's surrender." The clerk smiled sadly. "That's what I said too." The hotel shuddered, not violently, tiredly, like a structure finally admitting it couldn't hold itself together anymore. The walls flickered, the ceiling cracked, not with noise, but with light. Outside, the forest pressed closer, reclaiming space inch by inch. The clerk's form began to fade. "If you don't stay," he said, "it will find someone else." "I know," I replied. I took the guest book. The moment my hands touched it, the hotel reacted. The air rushed inward as if the building were inhaling for the last time. Names flared briefly across the pages. Every person who had ever passed through this place, every unresolved moment, every paused life. Then they were gone. All of them. The hotel screamed, not audibly, conceptually, a rupture in expectation. And then it collapsed, not into rubble, into absence. I stood alone among the trees, no light,
No porch, no road that felt wrong. Just forest, just cold, just morning. When I checked the time, it was 6:16 a.m., and for the first time in years, I felt nothing pulling me in any direction. The disappearances stopped, not gradually, immediately. Old cold cases remained cold, but no new ones fit the pattern. No more vague mentions of a hotel, no more bells in reports, no more stories that made my hands shake when I read them. The world moved on, as it always wanted to. I kept the guest book locked away. Most days it's just paper, but sometimes, rarely, I swear I can feel weight inside it, like memory pressing against binding. I don't open it. I don't need to. I still wake up early in winter, sometimes close to 6:14, sometimes a little after, but when I do, there's no bell. Only the quiet knowledge that moments end whether we want them to or not, and that saving people doesn't always mean pulling them back. Sometimes it means letting something else go. If you're listening to this, if you found this story because you were searching for something that felt familiar but wrong, remember this. If you see a light that feels too kind, if stopping feels easier than continuing, if rest sounds like permission, keep going. The road always exists again, and nothing that asks you to stop forever deserves your name.